Sahana Bhavatu Sahano Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karavavahe Tejasvina Vadhitamastu Mad Vidvishavahe. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. May we be nurtured together, may we be nourished together, may we strive together, may our learning shine, may we not quarrel. Peace. Alright, so would someone like to, if any questions from preceding session on our beginning of chapter 5, Karma Sannyasa Yoga, the yoga of true renunciation. Is there any questions as to what renunciation means? So I have some idea how to answer that in the class. Like, for whom is it? Can it be practiced? Is it something that is chosen by you? Is it automatically a spontaneous occurrence? Why is it there amidst or along with karma yoga? And what is the benefit of sannyasa yoga? All these questions may come up as we speak today about the clarification of what is renunciation, unless you already have some questions now.
I do have a question. So it's about giving up doership, but not the doer.
Yeah, okay. That's right. You don't give up the door because you can't give up the door. Even if you try to give up the door, there's still a door trying to give up the door.
Yeah.
And the door is not in your hands because, see, if I try to do something, then I have no choice but to try to do something. You're always doing something. So that means we're giving up not the door, but we're giving up sense of doership. That means the belief that I am the doer. So there's a subtle difference there.
Yeah.
And to give up that I am the doer, which is something that basically this is the condition of the world. If you look at it, like I do. Why do? I do to enjoy, of course. There's no other reason to do. But the condition is that I am doing. Whatever that doing means, it can actually mean I'm speaking, I'm running, I'm walking, I'm teaching, I'm listening, I'm going, I'm singing, I'm chanting, I'm forgetting, I'm remembering. All of this starts with that preceding I. And then it follows with the verb, implying that the I is that doer of that verb. So that means that giving up a sense of doership is not about giving up physical activities in the world, not about running away from home or saying, sayonara world, the world is not for me, or it's a dirty place, and I'm just gonna kind of backtrack into my own little space. It's got nothing to do with true renunciation. True renunciation, as we will discuss now, has very much to do only with the mental attitude. How you look at things in the world, and how you look at activity, how you look at not only objects, but also the doer, which is this person.
So you can have the renunciation of doing nothing.
So is the I am not the doer?
Yeah.
Is that the Atma or is that the Jiva?
I am not the doer is a direct understanding of someone who can also claim simultaneously Aham Brahmasmi, I am the self, which the silent implication is I am not the doer. But that can only be said after one's full understanding has been gained to what it actually means to say that, because anyone can make that claim, I am not the doer, or I am the self. But to actually know what that means and how much there is involved for that clarity, so
There's 2 stages to it.
it's a stage. So basically, that's where we're actually leading now, is that karma yoga is, of course, a stage that comes before renunciation. And with karma yoga is a certain recommendation for the doer of the world. That means, as we just said, everyone has a need to do. So that means that karma yoga we prescribe to keep doing, but with a sense of offloading or discharging your duties back to the field. Why? Why should you discard your duties, that means the results of your actions, to the field and not take ownership of them? Because if I take ownership of my actions as mine, who's the one that did the action? The ego. And if I take ownership of the results of my actions, then that's exactly what the ego is. It's a doer/enjoyer. That means every time the ego does something, its silent motivation is, I'm doing this to enjoy. So that means if it's doing and it's accepting the enjoyment, as in, oh yes, this is my action, not only is that reinforcing the doer, but it's also reinforcing the fact that I am the body and the mind. So that's the problem of this not following the karma yoga spirit, is that it's very innocent. We do things, we do our job, we do our business, we do learning, but it's all about I am learning, I am working, I am driving, I am arguing, I am agreeing. So it's all innocent, but it's simultaneously reinforcing the ego, the owner of that experience, and claiming the ownership and the enjoyment of that experience. All right. I'll start by clearing out a confusion, which is between what Krishna said in chapter 5 and beginning of chapter 3. Now, if you look at the Gita closely, the Gita is full of contradictions, seeming contradictions. One statement says one thing, and then the next time the statement says something totally seemingly different. So we have to resolve these contradictions. One of these contradictions comes up here in chapter 5, verse 1, where it is said, Sannyasam karmanam Krishna punaha yogam cha shamsasi yat shreya eta yoho ekam tan me bruhi sunishchitam. So that's the first verse. And it says that Arjuna is asking Krishna, why do you praise renunciation of action and karma yoga? So just stop there. Renunciation of action and karma yoga. Does that sound like two paths to you? Yeah, definitely. But if you now look at chapter 3 at the beginning, verse 3, chapter 3, verse 3, Krishna, the Lord says, I revealed two committed lifestyles when the world was created. The pursuit of knowledge and karma yoga. Does that sound like two paths to you? Yeah. So Krishna is saying that there's two paths, the pursuit of knowledge and the path of action, which is karma yoga. And here we have now a statement where Arjuna is asking, obviously this is what Krishna said, and he said to Arjuna that there is a path of renunciation of action and the performance of action. Performance of action means karma yoga, doing. Yeah. So here's how to resolve the contradiction. What does renouncing action imply if one's renouncing actions? What? Knowledge? Knowledge?
That's what it sounds like.
Yeah, knowledge. So, yeah, do you guys see what he said? He said knowledge. So that means when one renounces action, we'll talk about what renouncing means very soon. When one renounces action, they're doing it because they are entirely interested in pursuing Jnana Yoga, the path of knowledge. You see that? So that means when one is entirely focused into the scripture, into scriptural studies, into contemplation, then we say that is a renunciate. And we'll now see very much closely what is a sannyasi. So in this case, we have both renunciation of action, meaning renouncing action for the sake of pursuing knowledge, contemplating on the Lord, contemplating on the self, inquiring in the light of Vedanta, and the performance of action. They both lead to liberation. So that means that these two paths are presented as, we can now summarize, the path of renunciation, first one, that's where we're at now, chapter 5, and the path of action. Okay. So now, why would someone, where does path of action play, and how does it lead to the path of renunciation? Let's now discover that. What would cause one to naturally arrive to a what's called a sannyasi? Because sannyasi, as we will soon see, is a very it's one of the most advanced stages in one's spiritual life, which means that they've renounced the sense of not only that I am the doer, but also renounced any likes and dislikes towards the world. Which means that whatever comes, it's appreciated, but then it's recognized as not interesting for me. It's not because we're devaluing it, but because we're recognizing there's nothing in it for me that can really help me here. But at the same time, it's not, like I said, very important distinction. We're not devaluing it. We're not devaluing the world as in the world has nothing for me. We're just seeing that the world is a composition of put together by all knowledge and all power, and no matter what permutation and combination I look at, which is an object, it's intelligently put together by one same cause, which is Ishvara. In other words, a sannyasi, a renunciate, sees everything as what's in Sanskrit we have a word called samashti. Samashti means manifestation of Ishvara. Okay, so let's do a little path of action and how it arrives to renunciation.
So would a sannyasi be doing renunciation as a way of not taking on baggage? Is that what it would do?
It comes out of an understanding that in this world, everything is of the same cause. So there's no need to take on the baggage, because even the sannyasi, him or herself, is also a composition of that one same power, it's one same cause, which is the cause of the entire world. So there's no need to sort of glorify objects.
Something as separate
Yeah.
as an object,
Yeah.
which you then have a dislike or a like
Yeah.
to take on board.
Yeah.
Because then that's what it's baggage.
That's what it basically is. That means a sannyasi has that direct vision that ultimately, no matter what it is that I get involved with, there is nothing unique about it in a sense of like a different existence. It's still of the same existence, just a different permutation and combination of the 5 elements. Therefore, there is no attraction for worldly objects and worldly activities. Yeah, we'll see now more into this. Okay, now the path of action, we're now speaking about karma yoga, okay? The path of action is recommended because, in chapter 3, we're not reading there, is recommended because everyone has, if you look in the society, everyone is inherently working. We are living in a society of duty. Everyone has a duty to fulfill in a society. We cannot deny that. In fact, if we do, then one's probably using some kind of an excuse to justify then how I am, unique. I don't deserve to be in the world. So it's very important to understand, first of all, that the path of action, karma yoga, is prescribed because nobody here can escape the fact that you're alive because of other people's duties which have been fulfilled successfully and have provided you the services which you need for your daily living. For example, a farmer has a duty to take care of the crops, the tomatoes, the cucumbers, which then you use to feed yourself and stay healthy. And let's say the municipality has a duty to take care of the citizens in its local region, to build parks and keep the children happy, which your children then use to entertain themselves, which also helps you as a parent. Or the mining companies, they obviously extract resources and which we then use to power on our lights and benefit by education on the computer because they use electricity. So we cannot deny that the world we live in is a duty-based society. So then it stands to reason to say that if the world is a duty-based society, and that's what the world is, what makes the world work, then I also contribute back because the world is constantly keeping me alive. You see that connection? So the world is helping me to stay alive, no doubt. Clothes, someone made these clothes for somewhere in another country, which keeps me warm, prevents me from being ill. So then that means the field, which is Ishvara, is constantly providing for me. It's constantly causing me to be alive and therefore have the chance, the opportunity to fulfill not only my likes and dislikes, but pursue what is most important for me or for you. If it's moksha, then even though you may be studying, you're reading off books which themselves were a cause of someone's innovation at some point in time, in the 17 or 1600s, who created ink, how to type, how to create ink on piece of paper, which now you use so comfortably to absorb this knowledge and get a chance to contemplate. So that means we are totally and completely, as human beings, dependent upon our entire field upon which we live in. And that field is what we call that cause which connects that field together in such an amazing harmonious ways. For example, the sun warms the water and the water precipitation evaporates into the clouds, and the clouds, when the cold weather is enough cold, then the water falls down and it waters the plants, and then the plants give food for the animals, and then the animals provide food for the human beings, and the animals themselves have a food chain and serve other animals to stay alive. So you can see the immense amount of complexity and yet simultaneous synchronicity and dependence of each species depending on something else. So that's what we call this dharma field, which we cannot say that we are apart from. Thus, we say karma yoga is about acknowledging that field of karma, that field of dharma, and participating back into it out of what? Gratitude, because it is and is constantly helping me to stay alive every day. Okay, now what happens is eventually, after practicing the karma yoga spirit of discharging gladly your duties to the world, to the field, is eventually a human being starts to lose, well, not lose in a sense of apathy, but they start to slowly get disinterested in the world. They slowly start to get disinterested in achievement, in success, in fame, in being important, in standing out, in being someone in the crowd, in having some kind of reputation, in being seen in the society, being known for their accomplishments, being known for how smart they are, being known for what kind of turmoil they have gone through and successfully got themselves out of. Eventually, a human being starts to lose that sense of like and dislike about the world in terms of what they like and dislike. That starts to slowly dissipate naturally. This is a stage that every human being naturally comes to, whether we have contemplated about this or not. Just look at an old person, for example. An old person at one point was a youngster who was so ecstatic about the world, and they were wanting, so much things to. They were just consuming everything. And the more they grow older, the more they get naturally disinterested in the world. Did you notice that? Yeah, that means they more go naturally inwards. So that's what we're talking about. So what happens is, after the karma yoga spirit, we start to then get objective. Now, what does objective mean? Objective means that I am no longer operating through my likes and dislikes. So when we say someone's subjective, what does that mean? You see what I'm getting? In other words, they're generating an opinion, a thought, or an emotion based on their subjective, their own likes and dislikes. And the more objective we get, the more we can just look at it as it is for what it is without having the need to create or generate a meaning or an opinion about that event, thought, emotion, friend, girlfriend, boyfriend, son, husband, or even someone in the society which we would otherwise consider or look down upon because of their, terrible history of murder and, all of the stuff they've done, cruel stuff to the world, like Hitler. A subjective person looks at such a man with all sorts of personal likes and dislikes according to their idea of how a person should live. An objective person looks at Hitler very differently. They just look at him, well, they're just, they're just not a person who, they're a mind who has a certain view about the world, and that view is playing itself out through the gross body. I didn't say anything about Hitler. I just mentioned the obvious, what's happening in terms of his mechanics. Okay, so that means that after that certain time, we start to get objective in life. This is natural. Okay, now at this point, after having enough objectivity about life and about the world and ourselves included, then we make a choice. And that choice is of twofold. A, which is, I'm going to continue performing my duties to the world in a karma yoga spirit while pursuing self-knowledge. And B is, the world no longer interests me because I have seen enough. At the end of the day, it's all the same. It's just different variations of the same circumstances. In that case, in the case of B, solution B or option B, the person naturally comes to a position of a sannyasi. Okay, so now we have to talk about what is a sannyasi, okay? Or what does it mean to say a true sannyasi and a partial sannyasi? So I'm going to explain this with writing it down by taking the word sannyasa, sannyasa. Okay. Now there is a space here because these are two words. We're just going to take now nyasa. Nyasa is a renunciate, just to renounce whatever it is. So what does it mean just to renounce? To renounce whatever it is. Okay, let's just say, for example, I like to play marbles, and my dad recognizes that I'm 10 years old and I should move away, I should stop playing marbles. And I say, okay, Dad, I trust your judgment, I'm going to stop playing marbles. But then what happens is, as soon as I see my friends playing marbles, I do what? I want to watch the game. So that means I did renounce marbles, but I didn't completely renounce marbles because I still have a like for marbles. That means when the opportunity arrives, I am still attracted to holding my vision, holding my focus onto the marbles. That is what we call a marble nyasa, a marble renunciate. Okay, so now just take this example and imagine a whole life of different marble objects where we are only nyasas towards those objects. We have gotten away from them, for sure, but when the opportunity arrives in real life, it grabs our focus, it steals our focus, and we end up pursuing, or we end up sort of entertaining thoughts about that object. That is not a true sannyasa. So the true is where the first word comes in, which is sam. So this word sam is you could call it an enhancement to nyasa. When you put it before nyasa, then it's called true renunciate. Now, we are also all true renunciates of certain objects. For example, what do I mean by that? Okay, let's say one day now, after 20 years of not playing marbles, and I have a son. And my son comes to me and says, hey, Dad, come play marbles with me. So what I do is I go, okay, I'll play marbles with you. And I play with it just because my son asked me. But as soon as the game is over, I move back to my work. That means I just do it out of obligation because I was asked and I do that. In other words, I didn't, as a dad, now 20 years later go, oh yes, marble opportunity. Now I'm going to just, totally get into it all over again. Because after all, it's my son. Nobody's going to watch me. There's no dad who's watching me. So that means all of us, at some point, we become sannyasis. Sannyasi is a renouncer. When we add the M and the N, it becomes like this, sannyasi. That is a renouncer, and a sannyasa is a renouncing, a true renouncing. So that means all of us at some point in our life are already sannyasis about certain objects. For example, who still likes to play with their childhood toys? No, it's almost impossible for a hand to go up. Maybe once in a while. Why? But at one point we were so attached to them. Remember that? We were just, mom took away our toys and we would just, start to cry and just do everything, pull her skirt down and just to get our toys back or hit our dad. And now, a couple of years later, after our interest has certainly, it's faded away. So you present toys to us and we're just like, great. There's no judgment towards the toys. We're not insulting the toys. We're not devaluing the toys. We're not upvaluing the toys. We're just going, great, it's toys. Wow, sky, sun, that's it. There's no agenda behind it. So that's what a sannyasi is. That is, they just look at the world like those marbles. Look at the world like those toys. Great. But there's no motivation, there's no drive to go and watch the marble game, to get involved, to go replay it. See? Now, that means a very important point. A sannyasi is not someone who, once again, who adds value or minuses value from what they observe, even though they may look like that, because it seems on the outside like they're indifferent to the world. Like, dude, you're just not interested in anything. A sannyasi can look pretty boring, actually. Like cold and, kind of indifferent, neutral. But you can't really, you don't know what's going on in their head. So you actually can't tell a true sannyasi. Why? Because sometimes someone who is a sannyasi will show physical joy towards sense objects in the world. But inside, they're completely calm and indifferent to those objects. As soon as they walk away from that party, it's as if that party never even existed. But in the party, they're fully in the party. They're participating, they're talking. It's a normal stuff like anyone else. But as soon as they're out of there, that whole thing, it's like, what party? Why? Why is that? Because the entire vision is so absorbed into the scriptures, into devotion, into Ishvara, into contemplation, that one cannot find themselves going out because the self is just so beautiful. Yeah, that is a true sannyasi, one who is constantly focused inwards, despite them outside seeming like they're getting in the world and sometimes angry and sometimes, the mood swings. That is completely normal, and it's not even realistic to expect that to ever subside, because that's just operating through the gunas. The gunas control the entire creation. The rajas, sometimes there's rajas, we feel very agitated. Sometimes there's tamas, we feel kind of dull. Right? Sometimes there's a lot of sattva, we feel very clear. These three gunas you do not control. You see, so that means it's not exactly even fair to expect oneself to be consistent in their tranquility, in their serenity, in their sense of mood, like I am, so perfect. It just reveals the lack of understanding about the whole. That's why we say you have to start accepting your moods as just impersonal. It's totally impersonal here.
But you do it in consciousness, that's the thing.
You can be conscious, but you don't have to sort of go, I shouldn't feel angry, I shouldn't feel frustrated, I shouldn't feel depressed. That is not what a sannyasi, that's not what a Vedantin is. That belongs to the world. That is wrong thinking. Yeah. Because there's nothing wrong with any emotion. Emotion is not, you didn't create emotions, and emotions are always kind of like shining onto the three bodies. So the three bodies are completely subject to emotions, which is totally out of your control.
It's feeling the emotion, but then reacting to the emotion.
Yeah. You will even see this in the world where we have like a worldly sort of, the world gets into a certain stage of upliftment, or at the same time a little bit, into a downliftment. For example, when we had 911, that was like a typical tamas, like a cloud of tamas over the world. So it's sort of, in some countries at least, it sort of, adds a little bit of gloominess, fear. Yeah. So these gunas are always operating.
I just thought of something. Sannyasi see the world as clickbait.
As what?
Clickbait.
What's that?
Clickbait. Do you know clickbait?
No?
So it's basically in the internet when you're looking at something and then there's something flashing on a website and you just can't help but click on it and it's like a total distraction. So the world kind of could be formulated as that, as a sannyasi, like, oh yeah, but they're no longer attracted to it.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah.
Very good analogy, actually.
Yeah.
Yeah, very good. Like flashing banners.
Yeah.
But you often see that things that happen in technology and come up in society are reflections of what's going on a subtle level behind. It's just it's almost like a gross manifestation of something that's in the subtle realm.
Yeah, or even a new device comes out and then suddenly everyone wants it. What is that want? Rajas, desire. That means technology or new innovations in themselves control the amount of desires prevalent in a country. Yeah. Okay. So now we know the difference between Nyasa, a half-partial renouncer, and a true sannyasa. Okay, a few more points about sannyasi, so we're absolutely clear what is a true renouncer. It is, first of all, impossible to identify a sannyasi because, as I said, they can have a certain temperament. They can have a very cold on the outside. It's like, dude, you're just not interested in anything. You're just pretty boring. There's nothing to say. There's nothing to offer opinion. They're just not the kind of friend that you would have or want. But on the inside, they're totally happy. But they're just indifferent to everything. Why? Because they're reveling in the self as the self. Because the knowledge is so clear. On the other hand, as I said, you could also have a sannyasin who is kind of like more flamboyant, more expressive. And you would think, oh my God, this person is just full of rajas, full of agitation. That's why I say you cannot say. Because, why? Because, in fact, that kind of sannyasi would be more in line of what I would call healthy sannyasi. They're still able to appreciate the world, participate with the joys of friends and with their wife, with their husband, with their kids, with invitations. But at the same time, they're not affected by the events that happen amidst those events. So I would say that would be more in line of a healthy sannyasi who still values the world and appreciates and enjoys it because Ishwara is just so beautiful.
A less helpful version would be the one that wears the orange robes. As a look at me, I'm a sannyasi.
Yeah, man, we're all familiar with that, right? If you've been to India, you'll know. An important point is nobody can choose a sannyasi role. Why? Because it is, I'm not looking at that, because a sannyasi is a natural occurrence after having performed or discharged duties and recognized there is not much in the world and contemplated enough to realize that the world is as it is. It's no longer me projecting my likes onto the world. That's what makes the world attractive, my own likes. The world is totally neutral. How do we know? Because if I look at let's say I look at a woman and I think she's attractive. Some other man doesn't think she's attractive. So that means that object, which is value neutral, only became valuable because of my own likes. Coming from where? From my own past, from my own conditioning, from my own history. If, let's say, you look at a rich person and you go, wow, I want to be like that. And we start to sort of develop feelings, like let's say a person develops, like they want to be that Donald Trump, they want to be that person on camera. Guess what? Someone else doesn't. To them, it's like totally not attractive. It's like, oh my God, there's so much attention and you got to constantly be out there. Or a musician. We think, well, we want to be a Justin Bieber, we want to be the, that guy, where is he now, right? But not everyone wants to be a musician. Someone just wants to hang out home and just kick the ball around or, I don't know, play frisbee. So that means, once again, the sannyasi is not a role that one can choose. It is a role one naturally arrives to. And a sannyasi is one who is not dependent on objects of the world for their happiness. That is a very good definition of a psychology of a sannyasi. That means there is nothing in the world for a sannyasi which can add anything onto their already existing contentment and peace than what they're already experiencing. It doesn't mean that they're sort of invincible. Because remember I said a healthy sannyasi still gets to appreciate and has these joys. All that belongs to the body anyway, so it's the body experiencing it. But that core, that Atman, that core is so clear and it's so focused upon that nothing has any particular, it doesn't stand out in any way. So a sannyasi is one who doesn't depend on objects for their happiness, whether it's their own family, whether it's their own knowledge, what they know. That's a big one. It's a very subtle one. I'm only happy because of what I know. I don't need the world, but there's still a dependence on my own knowledge. Right? That's another tricky one. That means a sannyasi doesn't really, there's no likes or dislikes towards anything in particular, which means they're what's called non-binding vasanas. Their vasanas, their tendencies are not binding them down anymore. Because when something binds you down, what do you want to do? You want to be free. You want to free yourself. It's just a natural response. And so in order to free myself, a normal person will do certain actions in the world in order to release those chains. But why? Because their likes and dislikes are constantly driving them to do that. But a sannyasi has neutralized those likes and dislikes, therefore there's nothing holding them down. So it's very hard to say, but also to tell if a sannyasi has knowledge. It's impossible because you'll find even if you know India a little bit, you'll find a lot of, as you said, in the orange robes. They seem like everything's fine. Like, no problem. Everything's perfect here. And you think, my God, this person's ended their journey. But that's not the case. They're just in a, you can say, very detached from the world. Right? Because they're, this practice detachment for so long, and eventually you forget about your parents, forget about interests, and it's just like, fine, everything's fine. So that means you can't even tell an enlightened person from, just by looking at their behavior, who is very relaxed or very kind of loose about the world. Okay. That means we cannot, once again, order a sannyasi role, just like we cannot order someone to love us. There's no way you can get someone to love you or to force yourself to love another person. You can't do that. It takes time. It takes a natural progression, a natural course of events to lead up to love someone. Same thing with the sannyasi. That's why I said you cannot say, I'm going to choose to be a sannyasi. You just have to let it sort of, naturally take its course through contemplation, through assimilation of this knowledge, and then one day naturally find yourself more disinterested in worldly objects. All right. Now I would like to speak about what is renunciation in our favorite visual form. You'll see why I put this picture once we get through the mind map. What is renunciation? Okay. This comes from a beautiful 31-verse poem from Shankara, and it's called Bhaja Govindam. It's very popular. And Shankara was, the story goes, he was watching at that time there was a lot of rituals going on. Also in Buddha's times, there was a lot of rituals going on. But in Shankara's time, he recognized a sannyasi who was an ascetic, and he lived without care for even basic, as it says, necessities for living, or just basic clothes and like that, with matted locks and orchard robes. But the sannyasi was busy performing excess rituals, which is very common. And Shankara, this is actually not only in Shankara's times, but you go anywhere, even today, you go to certain parts of the country, ritualism is just excessive. especially in the Buddhist time, which is why I can tell you a story about why Buddha came to, why he rose. It has very much to do with excess ritualism. But he witnessed this ascetic who is living basic, like begging for alms, but at the same time, constantly, having their own sort of likes and dislikes. They're doing certain things in the world, and basically entertaining a host of desires in the mind, but ascetic on the outside. That is not what a sannyasin is. That is a half sannyasin. In fact, that is someone who uses this principle, which we'll now discuss, how to use this to back away from the world and not participate in it, and then use that in the name of I'm a sannyasin. It doesn't work like that. Okay, so let's talk about that image. It just represents someone with knowledge. It does, and also the word state, don't think that means like, the state of I know who I am. It's not a state. It's just, we'll just say state of perfection. When everything is okay with the world, with myself. You could sort of call it a state, but it's not an experiential state. Okay, the state of perfection, therefore, is only attained by the renunciation of desires. So now we have to talk about how not to deal with desires and how to deal with desires. And how to tie that in with renunciation. So the incorrect way to deal with desires is to take what we call the religious paraphernalia. Paraphernalia means different articles, different miscellaneous opinions about what is an ascetic. And this, like with many things, has diluted the original term of what is a sannyasi, which ends up being a facade to gain life in a state of subsistence. Subsistence means minimum survival, basically, using that as a form to get away from the world, not participate in any societal duties, and just live minimum. That is not what a sannyasi is, even though that is what is very imprinted in the minds of most. Because when we think of a sannyasi, we think someone with, who looks like that, and they're just cruising the streets, begging for alms, and their life is simple. That is not what it's hard to tell, but in most cases, that is not what a true sannyasi is. The other incorrect way to look at it is that sannyasi is one who retires from worldly activities. So that is not what a sannyasi is. In other words, they're not rejecting or denying the world. They're not rejecting or denying their family or their worldly duties. Because at the beginning I said everyone has a duty in this world to fulfill. Okay, so then what is the true way, or how do we take this into a correct way of looking at a sannyasi? It is measured by your mental disinterest towards world and its activities. Your mental disinterest. Not mental devaluing, but genuine mental disinterest. How? Through understanding that the world ultimately is permutations and combination of these 5 elements, and they all look different, which is what causes so much fascination in the world. And if I let my focus constantly follow the endless vikaras, the endless fascinations, my focus is never going to turn inwards. So thus, it is measured by mental disinterest with this understanding towards the worldly activities. We could say it's a state of mind, not physical retirement, but a state of mind or an attitude. And how does one naturally arrive to sannyasi? By practicing right living, that is practicing virtue, practicing what is right, swadharma, fulfilling your duties to the world, doing what you're expected to do in the moment when it's appropriate. Constant devotion, which obviously implies that one has a deity that is they're reminded about, or scriptural studies, and they go very well together. Because if you are constantly involved in, or watching videos or some kind of series that reminds you about, that talks about this non-dual oneness, this non-dual vision, then it constantly keeps your mind in that, and that keeps the mind away from contemplating about worldly activities. Yeah. Okay. So this now renunciation obviously means that we have to manage our desires. And let's see how to properly manage desires. Because you cannot become a sannyasin or be a sannyasin if one's still entertaining their likes and dislikes. Impossible. Okay, the correct way is to acquire knowledge of higher values. And what that does is it automatically ends up reducing the lower impulses about self-gratification. So what this means in your own life, if you, for example, just take your own life right now, have you ever gotten interested in something and you were so into it that sort of the world naturally faded away? Yeah? Or maybe in a dance, you're dancing and then you just go so much into dance that sort of everyone else fades away. Or you're into drawing, or into painting, or into creating music, computer programming, doing community work. That's a very common one. And you're just so absorbed in that work that it just keeps you like locked in, in that sort of that contribution, and it makes you feel good. So that is what knowledge does, and that especially when your actions are educated by the scriptures. Because now you're going to ask me, okay, well, what actions should I perform? How do I know what action is right? The answer is the scripture says so. It's all in the Upanishads. Like for example, performing your swadharma, doing what is appropriate when the society asks you to perform your duty. Another one is gladly discharging your duties to the field, knowing that the field is not yours. You didn't create the field. You didn't create the person who did the actions. You didn't create your own body. You didn't create your own hands. You didn't create your own thinking, and you didn't create the object upon which was engaged with this person. And you don't create the endless causes and effects which come back to you. So through that understanding, one can discharge any expectations to get what they want. Because if you think about it, if you were getting what you want, if you were really the author of your life, you would be getting what you want 24/7, every single second. But that's nobody's experience, is it? Yeah. Because see, that means you already would have had this knowledge a long time ago if you were the author. Like, who doesn't want to, stop seeking? Who doesn't want to have a total certainty about who I am and who I am not? Who doesn't want that? Who doesn't want eternal satisfaction with the world, themselves, and everything else in between? Who doesn't want that? But nobody has that. That means we're not the authors of our lives. That's why we then end up seeking. We ask for help. So it's through that understanding that I'm not ultimately the author of my life. And if I was, I would be having perfect children, perfect body, perfect health. I would live exactly how long I want to live. I would feel good all the time. I would have, endless money in the bank account. I would not have to work, and I would be able to, go to any country for whatever time, and everything will be accommodated. But that's nobody's experience. We all sort of do our best, but we don't have guarantee what we're going to get back. Yeah. So this kind of understanding comes from these scriptures, from the Shruti, and it causes us then to automatically thus get disinterested or slowly lose interest from those things which were otherwise attracting us to participate with. Because why? We didn't know that those things are also the same constituents as me, as you, as the sun, as the cloud, as the tree. It's just on a subatomic level, it's just particles, it's just atoms put together in different permutations, combinations, and there's nothing more to it. Okay, and just a nice analogy, it's just like the lower impulses fall away, just like those, when the fruit is an analogy for the fruit of renunciation. When the fruit of renunciation emerges, the petals, and each petal represents a desire which agitates the mind, falls away. So that means how to grow that fruit, just like you grow anything. How do you grow anything? You add attention to it. You add your focus. You add your love to it. You get interested in it. You attend to it. Which means what? When you attend to this knowledge constantly, unceasingly, you are what? You are watering that rose, which the fruit of your work is slowly emerging, and the more it emerges, the more those petals of agitations fall away. All of the petals which says who I am, but you're actually not that. Until all the petals fall away and all there is just that fruit of what? Of your work, of your time, of your effort, which you have put into every day of the week, every month, every year, until that fruit is absolute and there is not a single petal left. Maybe some are going to stay there, but it's fine because the brain's still conditioned to think in a certain way.
Maybe the petals are symbolic of the changing and the fruit is of the unchanging.
Yeah. Well, in that case, the fruit will always have to be there. Oh, that's just another good one, because then you can always, resort back to your fruit.
The fruit has the seed, and that would be forever. Whereas the petal is the desire for something beautiful, but when you actually go past that, it goes away, it changes into.
Yeah, in that case, the fruit will always have to be in the center, and the petals always have to be falling away, but new petals being born. Yeah, that's mithya, vikara, changing, but the fruit will not have to be changed. Okay, now we have discussed a correct way. Let's talk about the incorrect way of exhausting desires. And we'll give you 3 examples. A common 3 examples how people try to exhaust their desires and it doesn't work. So, see if you sort of fit into this picture. If you do, know that it's not working. Okay, the first way is through excessive sense indulgence. That means, let's say, I like soccer, and I do like soccer. Let's say that now my way to exhaust soccer is just to become a soccer player and then just play soccer all the time, thinking that one day I'm just going to get bored. Well, that may happen, but it's not going to happen, because what we didn't address is that as soon as that game, even if it does get exhausted because I've just, keep getting beaten by the other side and I get turned off from soccer, guess what? I'm going to take that desire and transfer it onto something similar. That means I'm going to gain another interest which carries the same desire from soccer. So that means even if I exhaust through excessive indulgence, it doesn't work either way. Because every time I indulge in a desire, whether it's food, whether it's object, whether it's a conversation that doesn't lead into any kind of focus or any kind of results or any kind of fun, if I just keep on getting into these things over and over again, then every time I do that through my door, I'm not only reinforcing the door, but also I'm reinforcing the vasana, because I'm watering the vasana, the tendency to repeat that next time. It's very simple. If you ever witness, if you hang around small children, you'll see in school that, as soon as if you listen to parents, as soon as they buy them an iPad or a phone, before it was fine, right? They didn't have any interest towards the phone or the iPad. As soon as you buy them the iPad or the phone, what happens the next day? They want to handle that iPad or phone again. They want to play again. Why? Because of yesterday. That means every vasana at one point emerged, and then today we are nothing but a continuation of those vasanas which at some point have emerged. Yeah, so that's why it's not possible to think about sense indulgence in hopes to exhaust our vasanas. The other way that this happens is people use an excuse. For example, they go, I'm just going to have a lot of sex to exhaust my sexual desire. And they use that as an excuse to get rid of it. But it doesn't work, because we just explained the mechanics. Because, like, for example, Tantra, if you know the Tantra world a little bit, one of my good friends, he's been in it for he told me everything, what goes inside, how, it's respectful, but the mentality is, let's connect. Why? So that we can experience a huge mega orgasm, so that we can maintain that length of that orgasm and contact, the idea is to contact God. And the problem with this is, it works for a while, but then the two people get attached to that orgasm, to that pleasure. So now, what do we say about a true sannyasi? Not dependent on any object for their happiness. But now here you have two Tantra couples who are depending on their union in order to experience some kind of amazing state. So that means they have corrected it, but they have simultaneously reinforced it, so they haven't actually done anything. Oh, okay, well, here's an example. Old man whose energy is sapped through overindulgence of his desires, and so most of his life he goes driving nice cars, he goes out, he has a nice drink, he does all of these wonderful pleasures of life. He travels a lot, obviously, and one day in his final years, he is now toothless and has gray hair. So now his energy is sapped. He no longer has that energy to pursue his desires, but his desires are still remaining. And what do desires do? They give birth to a new causal body, which, in other words, they sustain the causal body. And the causal body gives birth to what? To the other two bodies, to the subtle and the gross body. That means if one's desires still stay and they haven't purified them, and they die, and they're still super hungry about wanting to participate in that desire, then it's very possible, not always, but it depends on what's the understanding of the individual, so we can't actually tell definitively. It's very possible that the birth will take place again, because the desire has to express itself somehow. That's why we have sometimes born children who suddenly have desires for fighting, like kids, or girls' desire for just like extraordinarily kind, extraordinarily gentle, soft, and the other one's extraordinarily rough and cruel. Where does this come from? Previous vasanas. Yeah. So these desires are excess desires, what causes these rebirths. Now, a little note. I'm not saying that you got to exhaust every one of your desires. We already heard enough that that's never going to happen. We're just saying those desires which are very strong, which make my life worth living, those kind of desires. Because if I die and my life was about my children, then what does that mean? That means there's another body, most likely, in order to re-experience the joy of children. So that's why at one point a person has to slowly start really getting serious, that all of these things are more excuses to enjoy, but that enjoyment carries further to the death. And then if a person dies with these desires, then there's a rebirth, and then you got to go through the whole process. You got to find your guru again. You got to assimilate the teachings all over again, and there is no guarantee that you will even find your guru, because you can get caught up with other children who take you completely off the path in high school. Even if you're born in a good family, you're still going to high school with other children, and they influence your thinking, and you end up completely swayed off. Karma is like this. There's no such thing as this in karma. It's constantly, samsara is a constant stock market. Yeah. So the point here is that's how serious this message of moksha really is. Okay, the second way is through physical abstinence. This is the other extreme. This is hearing about that Buddhism is certain lineages of Buddhism would be extreme on this, and they will move away from the world, move to monasteries, but not even in Buddhism. It happens in spiritual communities where people will just go into vans and live from their van, and then just simple life. But it doesn't work, because we use an example here. Like, for example, such a person, a sannyasi, at least how you would look at them on the outside, what happens is they go under, let's say, a tree, and they're sitting alone. Now, when you're sitting alone, tell me this, from your experience, is your mind focused on the Lord, constantly on just one thing? Or is your mind probably thinking about history, what you saw today, what you said yesterday, about your mom, your dad, your children? What's your experience? The mind's probably going to go all over the place. That means it is still going to entertain a host of desires. Because think about this, what causes you to imagine a particular image? Likes and dislikes. That's why they keep occurring uncontrollably. Because why? There's a certain attachment to them. That's what causes thoughts to endlessly flow and not leave you alone. So that means the quantity of thoughts, when you're silent, if you just observe your thoughts, the quantity of thoughts that keep occurring in your awareness is a direct proportion to how many likes and dislikes are still operating. So if a sannyasi now sits under a tree and they're having a whole bunch of thoughts going on, then guess what? It's just going to keep going on. It's just always new thoughts are going to keep arising. So the solution is not solved. Even if one totally gets away from the world, goes to the Himalayan mountains and thinks, I've now got the ultimate peace. It doesn't work like that. Because even if you're in a mountain, think about it this way. You're now in the mountain and you're thinking about what? The weather's cold. Is some other sannyasi going to come by and disturb my peace? How am I going to get my food? How am I going to survive? Is this the right decision? Could have I done better? What are my parents thinking? I forgot my books. Now I need to go back down and get some more books. I'm not sure I need to check up. Is this really true? I need to verify this, but I can't verify because I'm in the mountains. This conversation goes on endlessly. So no matter where you go, the thoughts are always with you. That's why the second way doesn't work either. Now, the third way is a balance of 1 and 2, which also doesn't work. Neither excessive indulging nor abstaining from the world, which is good so far, but this kind of person goes on pilgrimages, they have vows, they have honest worship, they are very religious, they provide charity, they do community work, community service, they help other people, they have ritualism, they're very honest, authentic, genuine, they have morality, they have faith. They're very much in their routine of honoring and worshipping the Lord. Now you say, what? What's wrong with this? This doesn't work? Okay, how do we now, why would this not work?
Because they become attached to that activity.
Yeah, they're attached to the ritualism. They're attached to their worship. Why? To give them a sense of completion, to give them a sense of joy, to give them a sense of connection with God. If I don't do my ritualism today, I don't feel connected to God, which is what? Advaita. That means God is apart from me. So what's missing is in this kind of person, what's missing is they're not following or practicing their rituals or it's not born out of right understanding. Meaning what? Why am I doing this? And for whom am I doing this for? And who is the doer of all of these actions which I am doing? This understanding is not there. That means the doer still remains. And it's the doer that we're trying to disidentify from. Because the doer is the ego. I am the doer, and the doer is what? The body, mind, intellect. And as long as one stays in the body, mind, intellect, that is anything other than freedom, anything other than liberation. So that's why we say it is not born with the right understanding, that thus it does not work. It's just an honest religious life. You like the person, they're very good, you want to hang around them, they have a lot to say. They're very honest, like the kind of person that you would want, most of us to be. But still, it's coming from more like a routine. If you want to see an example of this, go to Bali, remote villages in Ubud. They're just very huge, I respect them, I like them because they're beautiful ceremonies. But every day it's just dozens and dozens of ceremonies. And you would think, wow, this is an amazing religious culture, and they are. But does the person who's doing the ritual, do they know why they're doing it? Or are they just following it because they learned it from their parents, they learned it from their grandparents? So you have to know, why are you doing your ritual? What is this symbolism? What does it mean? It's all about the understanding, never about the actual practice. That means you can be licking grass, and that can be more effective with the right understanding than going to a temple and, praying to Buddha. All right. This is going to take us to this word called vairagya. Vairagya simply means, remember raga? I used raga, dvesha, and it means attractions, raga, attractions, and dvesha, repulsions. So that means one who has transcended or gone beyond these attractions and repulsions, we give them a name called vairagya. That means transcendence of these desires. But a person who is a vairagya, we call that a vairagi. That means they are a renunciate. So it's just another fancy name for, you don't have to remember, it's just a person who has truly renounced. Now, the reason I'm bringing this forward is, like with many terms in our world, through course of time, what happens is the meaning, the original essence of the message gets lost. Just like the caste system in India, it's associated with usually with what family you're born in, but it's got nothing to do with that. It's just what is your mental temperament according to your three gunas. So things like this get slowly lost in time, and so has renunciation been lost in time, which is in this case vairagya. So what it doesn't mean is a false sense of association, or it has nothing to do, renunciation has nothing to do with association or dissociation of objects. Nor does it have anything to do with activity or inactivity of the world. That means if you look at a physical sannyasi, like a person, it has nothing to do with the fact how many objects they're attracted to, how many objects they have in their life, or how few objects they have in their life. It has nothing to do with that. And renunciation has nothing to do with how many activities you do or don't do in life. This is super important, because we think that renunciation means doing nothing. That means you can still be fully in the world and be renunciate, but no one is ever going to know, because in the world you're operating like any other person. But inside you have this proper understanding that the world is the world, and I'm objectively accepting it as it is. Thus, my likes and dislikes are not coloring in the world and adding value where otherwise there shouldn't be any value, because I gave it that value. Okay, so once again, that means vairagya, which is transcendence of raga, has nothing to do with how many objects you are associating or not associating with, or how many activities in life you're performing or non-performing. What it does have to do with is development of a proper mental attitude. And here's the important part, and the relationship of your mind to those objects in your life and those activities in your life. You see the difference? It's the relationship that you have towards objects. Whether it's family objects, house objects, work objects, employees, colleagues, it doesn't matter what the word object is pointing to, it's the relationship you have to that. And it's also what relationship you have to your activities. Because let's say you're working and you don't particularly like your work. Is that a true renunciate?
No.
No. Because how does a true renunciate look at work? Objectively. Their likes and dislikes are not coloring in their work and saying, I shouldn't be doing this, or I want to do more of this. They're just doing it out of what? Duty. Why? So that once the work is done, then a sannyasi, a true sannyasi, uses that only as a means to come home, basic necessities of life, and contemplate on the scriptures, contemplate, self-inquire. Whereas a karma yogi still has a lot of rajas, still wants to go in the world and party, and but they're respectful, they know what they're doing, they're smart. But if you tell a karma yogi, see a person of action, of this kind of person, if you tell them karma yogi, they'll be very interested with it, because they're like, oh, thanks, the Lord's giving me permission to act in the world and still do what I do, what I love to do, but with a different attitude. A karma yogi is very much going to like that kind of statement. Whereas a renunciate, when they hear the statement of karma yoga, they're going to say, what, you're telling me to do things that I'm going to operate in the world according to my likes and dislikes? Sorry, I just don't resonate with that, because I'm disinterested in the world. There's nothing in the world for me. I'm happy with myself. So a sannyasi is very much, you could say, associated with this word alone. It's not a bad word. It just means they're very much like to spend time to themselves, and they're very happy with themselves and their own company. That is a very good sign of a sannyasi. That means they can be with friends, it doesn't matter. They can be alone, it still doesn't matter. It's the same thing for a sannyasi. A sannyasi also is a quality I'm sharing, is someone who just doesn't mind. If you give them this job, they're okay with it. If you give them that job, they're okay with it. They like to help, but there's no attachment towards someone giving them approval of what they're doing, or kind of acknowledging their work. They like to do things here and there. They're just sort of kind of like, I like everything. They're got general type of people. And they say usually, I don't know what I want. Like, I don't know, I have no specific focus in life. They're just sort of generally accepting whatever comes. If it's there, it's there. If it's not there, it's not there. It doesn't affect me. I am pretty happy with myself. That's the kind of renunciate thinking. So, which means ultimately it's their relationship to the objects and the activities. Okay. So once again, this vairagi, a renouncer, is a person of renunciation who does not reject or run away from the world. That's where we're establishing this clarity. So we don't think that this means spacing myself away from my moral duties and responsibilities. Think about it. You're alive to this day because so many people, including your parents, have spent so much time and effort in growing you up, in helping you to be where you are now. And people that we will never meet in our lives also helped us to be where we are now. So then why should I just now go, oh, thanks, now I'm just going to go in selfishly, in my little corner and then just do nothing but inquire? Where's the sense in that? That's why I say it's got to be a natural progression. That's why karma yogi, after having done a certain amount of activities in the world, they naturally start to get disinterested in the world and then start to say, I love the world, but honestly, I'm just not interested in participating and going and traveling and going to parties and seeing friends. I'm just happy with myself. Such a person, called a vairagi, performs their duty while remaining amidst and maintaining their relationship towards their wife, husband, children, job, money, parents, house. Their moral duties stay. But without any sense of possessiveness or anxiety to enjoy the results of their actions, which sounds very much like karma yoga, doesn't it? Yeah. So that means we can use this picture, the attitude between a normal person whose thoughts are of profit. What can I gain out of this? How can my family get, how can I get, whether now or the future? How is this going to help me increase my status? Whereas a karma yogi or a renunciate is engaged in the world, but their focus is constantly on knowledge, self-knowledge in the form of inquiry. Same thing. So you can't recognize, you can't say anything by just looking at it physically. That's why we say you cannot identify a sannyasi, because it's all about the understanding. It has nothing to do with what clothes you're wearing, how long the beard is, where you live, how little you have, how much you have, what kind of car you drive or don't drive, what kind of job you have. It has nothing to do with that. And unfortunately, if you know that after some time hanging around in the spiritual world, there's a certain expectation when people come in, and they think how a person with knowledge is supposed to look like, talk like, sound like, what they're supposed to wear, and this like, which is their own personal subjective like, sabotages their success by causing them to leave and not come back, because they're trying to find a match according to their likes and dislikes. They're trying to find that person who resembles, quote, the enlightened one. And they will never find it, because if one doesn't have knowledge of who they are, they cannot identify one who does have the knowledge of who they are. So it's a self-defeating cycle. So that means we cannot let these likes and dislikes keep operating and causing us to sway off what's really important. Otherwise, you won't see someone who's trying to help you. All right, we'll bring a slow closure to this. Renunciation. That picture is pretty much the summary of renunciation. The focus is always on knowledge, on Ishvara, in the light of the knowledge that we're learning in class. Okay, what is false renunciation? Here's how to be a false renunciate, how to be a fake renunciate. Or what is the attribute of a fake renunciate? When they are amidst the world, like anyone else, there is general ignorance or denial or missing out on the joys of life. So what this means is such a person can look at, let's say, a rainbow, and the attitude is, oh, it's just a rainbow, it's just the world. It's all an illusion. Just go back, contemplate on the self. You see that distance? How they're rejecting the world, but they're not separate from the world. So this kind of ignorance is what we call a false sannyasi, who constantly devalues, whether it's known or unknown, or subtle or very pronounced, the value of objects in the world, in the name of trying to discover who they are. It doesn't work like that. That's why we need proper knowledge, recognition that everything you see around you has been your greatest blessing. Even imagine like being in, not having the roof right now, and then the rain falls, and then we get wet and we can't concentrate. So that means these people who we will never meet, who made the roof, they're actually helping us to assimilate the knowledge, and we will never meet them. So it's that kind of understanding that everything's connected, everyone's here to help you. There's also no capacity, as I said, to enjoy. That is, there's a general sense of kind of like rejection. I had a sannyasi like that, a false sannyasi. It was my friend for a while. And if you've been with such a person, you will know that it's kind of like, it's very hard to be their friend. It's like, it's just indifference. You can't like connect, because they're just constantly, well, everything's an illusion. right? It's just constant like rejection of everything. And it's very hard to, it's like lifeless almost. There's no life, there's no humanity, there's no realness, down to earthness. It's sort of, I don't know, like some up in the air and like the world is some place that's here to trick me. It's all Maya. I alone am, real. Just focus on your breath and just, stay inwards. That kind of thinking. Yeah, that's not a sannyasi. That's just a uneducated sannyasi. Okay. What is a true sannyasi? How does a true sannyasi think? Or what is their attitude? They're fully cognizant. That means they fully perceive or notice the value in the world or the joys in the world. Why? Because it is all creator. It is all Ishvara. So how can you not see joy and beauty in the world if you recognize that all of the joy and beauty in the world is only because of you? If you don't exist, what is there to experience? What is there to appreciate if there is no awareness? That means all of the joy and the beauty in the world is only possible because of whom? You. And you are that Ananda, that limitless bliss. That means all of the joy that we experience is me.
Beauty is in the eye of the beholder.
Yeah. It's in other words, James has a nice statement. He says, you are the beauty that makes beauty beautiful. That means you are the beauty that makes this beauty beautiful. When you see a rainbow or a sunshine or some kind of a very pleasant experience, then you appreciate it. Like, wow, I am so beautiful. Like, Ishwar is so amazing.
Because it would be wrong to be ambivalent about that kind of beauty, wouldn't it?
Huh?
It'd be wrong to be ambivalent
Yeah.
about that kind of.
Yeah, it would just be incorrect thinking. Something is fuzzy about that kind of thinking. It doesn't make sense because, see, the jumper is never separate from the wall. And all of the joy is from the jumper. It's only known because of the wall, sure, awareness, but the joy is only possible because of the jumper, which is not separate from the wall. That means all of the world is not separate from you. So it's impossible to reject the world through this understanding. Okay, so besides them being fully cognizant, one, and two, having the capacity to enjoy, they remain, number three, amidst the world sense objects. They fully remain amidst the world, like any other person. But, now here's the important part, but maintain a constant, unceasing, natural understanding about what the world really is, vikara, changing, and because it is always changing, getting caught up in the changes is what bound to disappointment, because no change remains the same. Thus, out of that understanding alone, can I look at objects as value neutral. Because by the time I look at something and I attribute value to it, 5 seconds later already, the nature of my experience, my mood towards that object and the object itself has already started to take noticeable change. For some of us, it takes 50 years to start to notice a change. So through that understanding alone that nothing lasts, tell me where's the logic of trying to put my joy, put my security in a constantly never-ending changing object? Where's the logic in that? Because of that understanding, as sannyasi, not out of devaluing the world, but through their understanding, chooses to remain in that one single principle which never changes, which is always full and complete, being I.
In the presence.
Yeah. Indifference and disinterested. That's the result. Not to express, now you know what this picture means, right? Like, great. Joys of the world, great. Sorrows of the world, great. I'm happy. The body may not be happy. The mind may not be happy, but it doesn't touch me. Thus, the attitude, you could, in a sort of way, and like a metaphor, it's like fantastic, everything's fine. It's not fake. It's not, oh, I heard about this, so I'm just going to act as if everything's fine. You see, it's just a natural arrival to this through contemplation. Okay, summary. What is detachment? Because we used the word detachment early on in this talk. Now let's get to the word detachment. What is detachment not about? It is not about external practices. Why? Because external practices only distract me from what? My likes and dislikes. We're not saying things, there's no place for external practices or techniques. They do help a lot. In fact, they are recommended and they're always personal to you. That's why the Bhagavad Gita does not give you techniques. Garrett, you asked me this last time. Does it give you any technique? It doesn't give techniques specifically because it adapts and appeals to all cultures, all races at all times. The technique is up to the person. But how to live and how to use these techniques, how to the foundation upon which these techniques are laid upon, that's what the Gita is about. And the foundation is you. So these techniques do help, but they are not what detachment is about. Because, see, if I am, let's say, attached to something, and someone gives me a technique, and then I apply it, and I go, wow, this really works. What's going to happen, let's say, a month from now? I'm going to find most likely a better technique, or the technique's going to lose its potency. Happens all the time. All of us here have practiced techniques at one point in our lives, no doubt. Meditation techniques, Vipassana techniques, certain techniques of visualization, white light, whatever. It's just hundreds and thousands of techniques. Yoga techniques, standing on your head techniques and poses, asanas. If it really worked, why aren't you still doing it? Yeah. Why aren't you doing it constantly if it really works? Because it's another vikara. Yeah, so it's not about the techniques or external practices, even though they have their place. Like, it's all an illusion or it's all me. That's another arrogant statement to now get this knowledge and then go, oh yeah, it's all me. Consciousness, it's all me. You can say that, but it has to be a context for that. But using that in the terms of trying to, sort of justify for not doing the real work, not attending to the duties of the world, that is disastrous. Okay, what is detachment about? It is about lifting the mind's preoccupation from that left box or right box to this box here. Now there's a very nice symbology here. This box, that means lifting your mind from this to that, or moving your focus from here to here. Now this box, see different colors. That just represents the endless amount of vikaras in the world. There's always new boxes falling into your, into one's life. And this image just represents desire, like the fun things of life. Now this box is endless. Why? Because Ishvara is endless. There is no ending to the amount of permutations and combinations that you can experience, enjoy and appreciate. No end. Whether it's kama, dharma or artha, it is all endless. There's no ending to it. Or you can move your focus, the mind's focus, to the other side, which means that every box, see how it's the same color? That means it carries a flavor, it carries a scent of what? Contemplation, discrimination, satya, mithya, and thinking about knowledge in the light of what you have heard that is bringing you closer, I'll put that in quotes, to who you already are.
To the unchanging.
To the unchanging I. And having total clarity about that unchanging I so that it's even more clear than the changing. So it is about the lifting the mind's preoccupation with the world to the contemplation of the truth. That is true detachment. So what is true detachment? lifting the mind's preoccupation from the changing to the unchanging and contemplating constantly on the unchanging in the light of what you have heard. Not in the light of what we've picked up from the spiritual world here and there. Just ask, who am I, and just wait for the answer. So a personal perfection, as once again that with knowledge, revels in the self as the self, because they know there is only the self. They have no ego attachments, no desire to enjoy, even though they have the capacity and the cognition to enjoy. They live a minimum life and they demand nothing from others. Why? They're just generally self-sufficient. Very simple life. So that means, once again, you can live this and still be this amidst the world. As I said, it's got nothing to do with worldly objects or associations. It's your relationship to those things which you are involved with. That's all that we're speaking of here. Okay, and then a beautiful summary from Shankara, which is from his Bhaja Govindam. That's his poem towards, at the beginning I said it was a poem towards a worldly person, giving them advice to stop constantly indulging in desires and never-ending changes, and being obsessed and fascinated, and to seek the truth right now. That means it's never too late. Right now simply means wherever you're at, you seek the truth and you get obsessed with it from that point. Yeah. That means renounce the insatiable desires and to seek the truth. That pretty much sums up a beautiful summary of life. Renounce insatiable desires that constantly extrovert my mind, causing me to think about everything other than me, other than the self, and to seek the truth. How? Obviously by scriptural study, devotion, and constant contemplation of this knowledge. Okay, any questions?
Where it says no desire to enjoy, I mean, that doesn't mean you don't enjoy.
It doesn't mean, yeah.
It just means you're not going to get caught up in that desire to keep enjoying or to be looking for the next enjoyment.
It means that
the moment is, in the present is there, while the joy is there, you're enjoying.
That's correct, 100%. It also means that if you take such a person and you put him alone and you offer them all of the entertainments, right, and you just move away, and it's like kind of like tempting objects, a little bit of alcohol, a little bit of drugs, a little bit of theme parks, a little bit of fast cars, a little bit of nice food, and you leave him there, they will have zero interest towards every one of those objects. No different than if you put him in a forest. Sarve bhavantu sukhinaha, sarve santu niramaya, sarve bhadrani pashyantu, ma kaschid dukkha bhag bhavet. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. May all be happy. May all be free from illness. May all behold good things. May no one suffer. We have now discussed about true renunciation, what it is, what it isn't. We've also learned that we cannot claim a status of a sannyasi. It is an organic growth. It takes time. And we've also established that through the course of our lives, we start to naturally lose, it's like an organic disinterest towards the world. And then we naturally go inwards to spend more time on the scriptures. Some of us do it very early, some of us are very late, but it doesn't matter. It's just an organic progression of a human being. We have also discussed what sannyasis are not, what a false sannyasi is, what is a true sannyasi. And the good news is that we learned today is that a sannyasi is not what the traditional image has most likely reinforced in our minds of someone who has to sort of go into the woods and contemplate. Even though it has its place, it's also acceptable, but it is not necessary. It's just the relationship that we have with the already existing objects that we have in our life. So that sort of takes off the pressure of having to make significant lifestyle changes. Yeah. And we've also seen that karma yoga has its place for a very desirable, passionate person in the world. They love to do, they enjoy activity, they're very kind of, they're full of life. That's karma yoga is very appropriate for that person. Whereas someone who's very quiet, usually alone, they're very contemplative. They have a very thinking mind. They're very, they're happy with the world already. Nothing really disturbs them. They're usually sort of, they look introverted, or they may be representative of an introverted person. That is most likely moving towards the role or the natural attributes of a sannyasi. Yeah. So see, it's just a progression.